A letter I signed on behalf of the American Center for Law and Justice has just been released to the public. This is a group of various groups from Washington, D.C. across the country encouraging, if not demanding, that Congress reinstate the Hyde Amendment through whatever budget reconciliation is done. We talked about that, this massive reconciliation package. We've also talked about the fact that the Hyde Amendment, it runs out at the end of this month. Now, there could be a continuing resolution to fund Congress. We'll get into all of those details. But we've got to make sure the language is there.
The Hyde Amendment came into existence for that very reason, to make sure that your taxpayer dollars, our taxpayer dollars, are not used to fund abortion services, which means more money to Planned Parenthood and others. So it's been on the books for, oh my goodness, well over 40 years.
The House of Representatives has already laid down language. They already want the Hyde Amendment removed, and so that the United States Senate is going to have to stop that. And then, Jordan, the second phase of this, they're really throwing everything at the wall here. The second phase of this is going to be in the reconciliation process. That's a $3.5 trillion bill. Jordan, they want to fund abortions in that bill. Fortunately, when the United States Senate passed their underlying budget, there was an amendment passed by Senator Lankford. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, a Democrat, voted in favor of it, and it passed by a single vote that does reinstitute the Hyde Amendment. But all of that to say, Jordan, there's going to be a lot of bites at this apple over the next several weeks. That's why this letter came out today in defense of protecting taxpayers from having to fund abortion.
Even right after Roe versus Wade, Republicans and Democrats came together and said, we don't want Americans to have to fund this, so we're not going to use taxpayer dollars to fund this divisive procedure that more than at least half the country that time and now believes is murder. So we're not, even if it's legal, we're not going to use your taxpayer dollars to fund those procedures. And everyone accepted that, but we're not living in that time period anymore. We're going to see how the Democrats conduct themselves next week on these congressional committees as they begin the process of questioning the administration, starting off with Secretary Blinken on the way the withdrawal was done, leaving Americans behind, the problem with the refugee vetting that's occurring in the United States, the announcement of who is in charge. I mean, if they're even considering dealing with the Taliban.
There was all this hope, I guess, and it was obviously false hope and ridiculous, really, that the Taliban were going to somehow install a more moderate government, that a government that would be more reflective of progress. And what you got instead is the hardliners of hardliners, designated terrorists, former Gitmo detainees, now running the government. And our government's acting like they're shocked about this.
There are members here that were somewhere from the Bo Bergdahl trade, but others. I mean, you've got the Haqqani. The leader of the Haqqani network has a $10 million bounty on his head, works closely with Al-Qaeda. His nephew is also, his nephew, for goodness sakes, they made a Haqqani family member who's also linked to Al-Qaeda, Rick, the head of refugees.
It's really scary that we have found ourselves in this situation after 20 years. We're coming up on the anniversary, and we've completely gone backwards. And I would argue it might be worse, because now they have a formal government and are seeking recognition from Europeans and others. And we've already seen some talk and chatter in Europe that, well, this is the government of Afghanistan, it's the Taliban, and so we're going to have to work with them. Anthony Blinken is with Foreign Minister Maas in Germany right now. He's just holding a press conference. He was asked directly, are you going to deal with the Taliban as the legitimate government? He didn't give a clear answer. He's trying to bob and weave. He's trying to have it both ways. I think that's unacceptable. He should immediately say, absolutely not. We're not negotiating with terrorists.
School choice back at the Supreme Court once again. This is our brief. I'm holding my hands right now. This case is out of Maine.
The fact that we're having to litigate this in 2021 is ridiculous.
Why are we back at the Supreme Court again on this question?
There seems to be recalcitrance or resistance in the lower courts. Keep in mind that the Supreme Court for a number of years was very strict about saying that you can't have any government funds going to the teaching of religion. And the Supreme Court since that clarified, not only is it fine, that in some circumstances it's a constitutional right. You can't penalize people parents in particular, because they choose a religious education for their children.
Was it the state or was it the courts that prevented the parents from utilizing these vouchers to go to religious schools if they chose?
It was the state. What happened was that in Maine, there are a lot of rural areas where they just don't have a public high school. So what the state did through its legislature is it said, well, all right, if you don't have a public high school, you can just pay the parents the tuition up to a certain cap to any school they want to go to, private or public. Parents use that to go to both private secular and private religious schools until the state, in response to state attorney general opinion, decided that it was an establishment problem for them to pay the tuition for parents at religious schools. And so what they did was they adopted a new law saying you can send your kids to any school you want and we'll pay for it, except not a school that, quote unquote, promotes the faith or belief system with which it is associated and or presents the material taught through the lens of this faith. It's trying to thread the needle and say, well, all right, we're not excluding religious schools because they're religious. We're excluding them when they teach religion, as if there's a difference between being a religious school and teaching religion.
My sense is that the main case should not really be, that you never count it over until it's done, but it should not be a difficult case for them in light of where their own jurisprudence has been, even while they were on the lower courts.
This should be a lopsided decision. Unless somebody on the court is going to say, well, we're not following our previous precedents that say you can't treat religious people and religious choices as somehow second class. The idea that there's a difference between excluding religious schools and excluding schools that teach religion is it's fake. I mean, it's like saying we're not making a law against evangelists or only people who preach the gospel. It's the same thing. So I think the Supreme Court should not have any problem seeing that that's the problem here. The fact that lower courts may think that there was some wiggle room left probably just reflects the fact that the Supreme Court will decide the case in front of it and not future hypothetical cases.
We were just talking about Afghanistan and the international issues, and the ACLJ is front and center on those. We're now talking about a domestic issue of school choice, and the ACLJ is front and center on those. We talked about the Hyde Amendment in the first segment, and the ACLJ front and center on that issue. We're going to be handling a very big abortion-related case that we're not going to announce quite yet, but we will shortly. It's a huge case that's going to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. I mean, there's a lot going on. Could well go to the Supreme Court. The fact is that we're front and center on these cases because of your support of the ACLJ. And I want to again thank you from all of us at the ACLJ.